Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio on a Workbench Wednesday. I hope you are having a great day wherever you are and whenever you happen to be watching this. Today I want to do a little follow-up to a video I did about a year ago where I talked about my 10 essential tools for model making. It's not that that list has changed at all. In fact, I think it's still a really good starting point for anyone jumping into the world of model making. And I'll put a link to that video if you'd like to check it out. But today I want to dig a little deeper and expand upon that original list with 10 more model making tools, which I also find to be pretty indispensable. A lot of these are longtime favorites of mine, while some were suggested by you in the comments to the original video. Again, this isn't an exhaustive list, and the tools aren't ranked in any particular order, but since YouTube loves a top 10 list, here we are. Once again, we are talking about small hand tools here of the kind that model makers tend to use the most. A list of essential power tools would be a good topic for another video. As before, most of these tools are readily available online or from your local hobby retailer if you happen to have one of those, and I will put links to all the ones I can find in the video description down below. But before we dive into the new list, let's go back and review what was on the original list of 10 essential model making tools, so you'll know where we're starting from. Number 10, scale rulers. Number 9, flush cut nippers. Number 8, needle nose pliers. Number 7, small clamps. Number 6, scissors. Number 5, Swiss files. Number 4, micro drill bits and a pin vise. Number 3, tweezers. Number 2, razor saw and a small miter box. And number 1, a good quality hobby knife. Naturally, I went into a lot more detail in the original video on all of those tools and why you need them. But now, with that out of the way, let's take a look at 10 more essential model making tools. As you expand your skills and your toolkit, you might find it handy to have these additional items on your workbench. Number 10. This is a very, very handy tool. In fact, it's really several tools in one. A lot of you will be familiar with these. This is an NMRA, National Model Railroad Association, standards gauge. This particular gauge is for HO scale, but it also works well for ON30 since ON30 and HO are the same gauge. You can measure several different things with this, to NMRA standards, which are pretty much industry standards. For example, you've got a couple of little slots right here, a couple of little divots. Those are for your wheels. Those are going to tell you whether or not your wheels are in gauge. Down here on the bottom, you've got a couple of little points sticking out. Those are for your track. That's to tell you whether or not your track is in proper gauge. On the opposite side, on the top, you've got a couple of more little points sticking out. This is for flangeway depth. Say you're hand laying turnouts, or you're ballasting track, or you're laying track in a street scene or something like that. You want to make sure that you have proper clearance for the flangeways of your wheels, and that's what these are for. This has a whole bunch of different measurements, different uses on it, and they come with complete instructions. These things are available directly from the National Model Railroad Association. Even if you're not a member, you can pick one up. And, I use this all the time when laying track, even, flex track like this. A lot of times we assume manufactured track is going to be perfectly engaged. That's not always the case. Sometimes you have to make corrections, and this little gauge right here is going to be very, very helpful to you in doing that. Got to have one of these. Number 9 is a set of jeweler's screwdrivers. This is one that a lot of people recommended in the first video. You left out screwdrivers, Dave. Well, I know. There was only room for 10 tools. So this one kind of got pushed off the bottom. Sometimes it's hard to decide what goes on the list and what comes off. But this one is definitely essential. This set I've had for, probably 20 years or more. It's made by General. It's probably still available. I'm missing one of the screw bits there. I think it's the, it looks like the smaller Phillips. So you've got like 3 flathead and 2 Phillips, and they just screw into here just like they would into a pin vise. And if you're going to be disassembling and assembling locomotives and rolling stock and things like that, lots of tiny little screws to deal with, this is something that you absolutely have to have. Number 8 is glue bottle tips. As you can see, I buy these in bulk. I pick them up on Amazon. They're not at all expensive. And what these are soft plastic tips that fit on to the top of a bottle of CA, cyanoacrylate. They allow you precise application of just 1 or 2 drops of glue at a time. Well, of course, depending on how hard you squeeze. But the thing I really like about them is that they're self-sealing. Because what happens is, when you're done using it, the glue is actually going to dry up here in the tip of the bottle. And the next time you go to use it, you squeeze, no glue's going to come out. Well, that's very easy to remedy. You take your hobby knife, you cut off that tip, and you're ready to go again. So they get a little bit shorter and shorter and shorter over time as you use them. So they are a consumable. You're going to go through a lot of them. But, you know, one of these tips lasts me, gosh, a month or more, depending on how much modeling I'm doing. So definitely a good investment, highly recommended. And by the way, one of the most asked about items in my videos, asked about tools. A lot of people want to know where I get these, and now you know. Number 7 is something that'll definitely be recognized by the machinists out there. These are called 1, 2, 3 blocks, and these are basically precision machined chunks of metal. They're called 1, 2, 3 blocks because they're 1 inch tall, 2 inches wide, and 3 inches long. You can get them with or without holes. I prefer the ones with holes because they're not quite as heavy, and you can, stick things in them if you need to. It's handy for holding things while you're painting them. I know machinists out there, that's not what the holes are actually for, but keep in mind that in a pinch, every tool's a hammer. The tool you need is the one that works for the job, and these work great for model making. I use them often to, keep walls square on structures and things like that. They make great weights for holding things down while the glue is drying. Now, 1, 2, 3 blocks can be expensive, and generally the more precise they are, the more precision milled they are, the more expensive they are. Usually I always tell people to buy the best quality tools that they can afford, but in the case of 1, 2, 3 blocks, if you're just using them for modeling, for model building and not, machine shop work, I recommend buying the cheapest ones you can find. They don't have to be accurate within a few thousandths of an inch for the work we're doing with model building. So get yourself a cheap pair. It'll last you forever, and I wouldn't consider not having a pair of these on my workbench now that I've been using them for a few years. Great thing to have. Number 6 on our list is a machinist square. This is something that pairs nicely with the 1, 2, 3 blocks I was just talking about. And as the name implies, this is for checking the square of things, for making sure that you've got your right angles at a right angle. This is a small one. This is about a 5-inch square. You probably don't need anything much bigger than that. Not much else to say about this except for it's getting kind of rusty. I probably need to clean that up, get it all shiny again. Great tool to have around. Highly recommended. Machinist square. Number 5 on the list is a pair of locking tweezers, also sometimes called forceps. You can see it has a little locking mechanism down here. So you can lock them at higher and higher levels of tension. Now, I talked about tweezers in the original 10 Essential Tools video. These are a little bit different because these are tweezers and a clamp all in one. They, whereas, with regular tweezers, you'd have to hold that in place. With these, you can, clamp things and hold things without having to have your hands involved. So it's almost like having a third hand in some cases. Very handy tool to have, highly recommended. But as always, get a good pair, don't get cheap ones. There's some out there that are made of pot metal where this piece will break pretty quick. These seem to be a pretty good pair and have served me well so far. Number 4, dress pins. Now this one is kind of, it's both a tool and it can be a bit of modeling material at the same time. I use pins for a lot of different things. This can be the finial on the roof of a water tank or something like that. But what I use them for the most is to hold things in place on a template like this, or a jig, where I'm gluing up pieces of lumber. They act almost like a clamp. They can hold things in place on top of a drawing if you put it on a piece of foam core like this. And very, very handy little thing to have. A very inexpensive tool. You can pick up, a box of these down at the drugstore for 98 cents or something like that. So definitely recommend it. I keep mine in a chunk of foam like this, so they're always handy. Number 3 is, well, this is the only homemade tool on the list. I guess we'll call this a painting clamp. And I made this from a clothespin and a length of 1/4 inch stock, just glued them together. Made it out of necessity one day because I needed a way to hold something and paint it without getting paint all over my hands. Great for rattle canning and airbrushing or whatever. Really easy to make, highly recommended, incredibly useful. Homemade painting clamp. Oh, and if you're looking for the specs on this to make one yourself, the handle is about 12 inches long, and I glued it on right about there. Easy. And here is number 2 on our list. I know it looks like there's nothing there, but the truth is you've been looking at it this entire time. I'm talking about this cutting mat. These are incredibly handy. I've been building models on these for years and highly recommend them. These are what's known as a self-healing cutting mats. They come from different manufacturers. This one is made by Fiskars. You can also get them from X-Acto. I like the Fiskars ones because they're larger. This one is 24 by 18 inches, and more importantly, they're double-sided. So when you wear out one side, even though they're quote-unquote self-healing, you will wear them out. When you wear out one side, you can flip it over and use the other side, thus doubling the lifespan. I'll put a link to where you can get these down below. I pick them up on Amazon. I've got 2 of them on my workbench right now. One is a little bit newer than the other, but man, couldn't get through a day of model making without one of these. Very, very useful. By the way, this is one that was a lot of people commented on in the first video and said, hey, you forgot to talk about the cutting mat. Well, here it is. Number 2 on the list, the cutting mat. Now, before we get to number 1, I should mention that it wasn't always that easy to decide, what was essential and what wasn't, what should be on the list and what should be left off. There's a lot of, great tools out there. And with that in mind, here's one that I think really deserves honorable mention. And that is the trusty utility knife. Now, just about everybody's house has one of these in the junk drawer somewhere or in their family toolbox. You can pick one up at any hardware store. This one has a lot of sentimental value because it belonged to my dad, and I've been using it for years and years and years. In fact, I don't think there's a single project that I haven't used this on. They're great for, cutting stuff that's a little bit too big for your hobby knife, thicker materials or long sheet materials and things like that. So honorable mention today goes to the venerable utility knife. And that brings us to the number 1 tool on this list. And to be honest, it's kind of a no-brainer. In fact, I'm holding it in my hand right now. It is a pencil. Yeah, if you're going to be measuring and marking and cutting and filing, you need something to mark with. Now, my preferred pencil is a Dixon Ticonderoga number 2, but your mileage may vary. You might like a harder lead or a softer lead. You might even prefer a pen. The point is you need some sort of writing implement to mark with if you're going to make things. And so number 1 on our list is the pencil. And now before we wrap things up, just a quick review of the 10 more essential modeling tools that are on this list today. Started off with an NMRA standards gauge. This one's HO scale, but I should let you know you can also pick these up in O scale, S scale, N scale, whatever model railroading scale you happen to be using. Then we have a set of jeweler's screwdrivers. These plastic tips for your cyanoacrylate bottles, your CA bottles. Very handy thing. A pair of 1, 2, 3 blocks, machinist square, some locking tweezers, dress pins, my homemade painting clamp. Very handy. I think I might need to make a new one of these. This one's getting kind of grody. Fortunately, they're not very hard to make. What else? Oh, the cutting mat itself, the pencil, and of course, honorable mention, the utility knife. And there you have it, my friends, 10 more essential model making tools, at least tools that are essential to me, to my process. These are things I reach for just about every day during builds and projects. But you know, you might have your own favorites, and I hope you will put them in the comments down below, and we can continue the conversation there. And that's going to wrap it up for this Workbench Wednesday. Thank you all so much for watching today. If you enjoyed the video, I hope you'll like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell so YouTube will let you know when the next video is coming from Thunder Mesa Studio. You can also follow over on Instagram at thunder.mesa and see the resources available on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. As always, a huge shout out and thank you to our Patreon members who help to make these videos possible. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Adios for now.